via YouTube dapat mengajukan pertanyaan lewat box live chat. Silahkan gunakan hashtag tanya caps lock sebelum menuliskan pertanyaan Anda agar kami mudah mengidentifikasinya. Kami juga akan berusaha mengakomodasi sebanyak mungkin pertanyaan di tengah keterbatasan waktu yang kita miliki. Dan apabila terjadi gangguan teknis dalam diskusi kali ini, maka ruang virtual Zoom akan dinonaktifkan. Dialog akan dilanjutkan via YouTube live streaming pada kanal YouTube NPC. Dan peserta yang hadir di Zoom harap segera menuju kanal YouTube untuk mengikuti lanjutan dialog kami. Seperti itu. Nah, sekarang saya akan memperkenalkan dan menyapa narasumber yang sudah hadir pada kesempatan webinar kali ini. Secara umum kita memiliki 3 narasumber. Yang pertama adalah Profesor Ilan Pape, yang kedua adalah Profesor Isham Udwan, dan yang ketiga adalah Miss Wafa Al-Udaini. Good afternoon, Professor Ilan.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time, for accepting our invitation to knowledge and experience sharing for this seminar, Professor. We are very appreciated, and we hope it's going to be a very productive discussion. And today, our topic is dynamics and challenges of Palestinian refugees in various countries. And you will have 30 minutes for giving presentation. And after all of the speakers speak, then we will have the Q&A session. With no longer explanation from me, because I don't want to be the fourth speaker today. So I will give Professor Ilan, and a little bit, I will knowledge Professor Ilan. He is the professor at University of Exeter in United Kingdom, and he is one of prominent historians and consistently follows the issue of Israel-Palestine Study Center for in European University, and Vice Director of Ethnopolitics Study Center, University of Exeter. He also already published so many books, articles about Israel and Palestine issue. That's why I called in the beginning, it's like a dream come true for me, for moderating this seminar. And he will be delivering topic about the Palestinian refugee challenges. What is the most needed? Okay, Professor, we have 30 minutes and the time is yours, please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to join you all this afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad that you have decided to focus on the question of the Palestinian refugees. If you look at all the efforts that have been attempted to solve the question of Palestine, or what is called the conflict between Israel and Palestine, you can see that one particular topic is always overlooked, ignored, and this is the fate of the refugees. And whenever the peace process is stuck or doesn't move forward, it's very clear that the main reason is that the issue of the Palestinian refugees and their right to return to Palestine has been ignored once more. So I think it's very important to focus on this question, to understand its origins, its significance, because without a just solution for the Palestinian refugee problem, there will be no just and peaceful solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's good to start with a bit of history in order to understand the present situation of the Palestinian refugees. I'm sure many of our viewers today and listeners today are familiar with the basic history, but just to be on the same wave, let me just repeat some facts which I think are very relevant for any contemporary discussion of the refugee problem today. Zionism is a movement that brought Jews from Europe and from other parts of the world into Palestine from the late 19th century. In many ways, this is a movement that today we would call a settler colonial movement. These are Jews who were persecuted in Europe and were suffering from anti-Semitism there, and they were looking for a safer place to live in. Some of them also wanted to create a national movement, and because of the connection of Judaism to the Bible, they had also a religious connection to the land of Palestine. Of course, the problem was that when this movement emerged, Palestine was already inhabited, and there was another people living there with its own just aspirations for independence, self-determination, and modernization. And like so many other settler colonial movements, like the Europeans who went to North America or South America or South Africa or Australia, there was a clash between the settler movement and the local indigenous native population. We usually say that, unfortunately, settler colonial movements like Zionism are motivated by a wish to displace the local population and replace it with the settlers. And in the process, they see themselves, the settlers, see themselves as the natives and see the natives as aliens, as foreigners. And therefore, a very important part of the strategy of a movement like Zionism is to get rid of the local native indigenous population. In some places, like in North America and Australia, this was translated into proper genocide. In South Africa, it created the infamous apartheid regime. In Palestine, it culminated in 1948 in the attempt of the Zionist movement through its economic power, through its military power, to get rid of the Palestinians in order to make way for the creation of a Jewish state. They only implemented what I called in one of my books, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They only implemented it in 1948 because until 1948, Palestine, as many of you know, was under British rule, and the British did not allow and would not have allowed such a massive expulsion of the people. But once Britain decided to leave Palestine in 1948, the historical opportunity emerged, which allowed the Zionist movement to use its military power in order to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from their homeland. The Arab world was trying a bit too late and too little after the British left to try and stop the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, but it did not succeed in doing so. And, you know, within 9 months, between the very beginning of 1948 towards the end of 1948, within 9 months, the Israeli forces destroyed half of Palestine's villages, 500 villages out of 1,000, expelled half of the Palestinian population, nearly 1 million people, and created a Jewish state over 80% of Palestine. The reason they did not create a state over the whole of Palestine was the Israeli leadership had an agreement with Jordan that in return for a very limited Jordanian contribution to the Arab effort to try and stop the ethnic cleansing, Israel would allow the Jordanians to have a small part of Palestine that became known as the West Bank. Israel in 1967 occupied that part as well, as we know, together with the Gaza Strip, and since June 67 controls the whole country of Palestine. Now, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948 was, first of all, a crime against humanity. And it was a crime that was not acknowledged as such at the time by the international community. And this conveyed a message to Israel that actually expelling Palestinians is something that the West, or the so-called civilized world, will tolerate. Because if they committed such a massive expulsion and they were not condemned and nobody was trying to stop them, it means that if they need to use the same method in the future, they can do it without fear of being condemned by the international community. And because the Palestinians resisted and because there was a limit to the Israeli power, the Palestinians, half of the Palestinians still remained on Palestine. And in the Palestinian refugee camps, where many of the Palestinians who were expelled eventually found a refuge immediately after 1948, contrary to what the Israelis and many people in the world thought, the Palestinians reawoken the Palestinian national movement. Palestinian national movement re-emerged in the Palestinian refugee camps in the form of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and continued the struggle for the anti-colonialist struggle, one should call it, for the liberation of Palestine. It is very important to focus on this historical period for two additional reasons to the ones I've already mentioned. One is that Israel did not complete the ethnic cleansing in 1948. As I mentioned, only half of Palestine's population was expelled. And because this was an incomplete project, many of the Israeli policies towards the Palestinians from 1948 until today are informed by this incompletion. And ethnic cleansing is still one of the major policies of Israel. It is not executed in the same way that it was implemented in 1948. Israel doesn't expel massively hundreds and thousands of Palestinians, but it uses other means for what I call incremental ethnic cleansing. There is a gradual ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian, which is seen by most of the Israelis as the best solution for what they would call the conflict. Every settler colonial movement has this dilemma in history. They want a space, but they don't want the people in it. So Israel wants historical Palestine, but it doesn't want the Palestinians in it. In 1948, it succeeded in getting rid of half of the Palestinians, but not of all of the Palestinians. In 1967, it succeeded in getting the whole area that it wanted, the whole of historical Palestine, but by incorporating the West Bank and the Gaza Strip under its control, of course, it did not only not solve the demographic issue, it added more Palestinians under its control. So in 1948, Israel expelled 1 million Palestinians. In 1967, it added 1 million Palestinians, even more today, few million Palestinians under its control. And because the Israeli government, whichever government, or the Israeli political and military elite, has not changed its mentality, has not changed its ideology, they still believe that the only way of fulfilling the Zionist dream of a Jewish state in Palestine is through getting as much of the land as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible. And that's why I'm saying that this kind of ideology informs the Israeli policies. Until 67, they have imposed military rule on the 100 and so thousand Palestinians who remained inside Israel. After 67, they imposed the same military rule on the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And those of you who are familiar with this daily situation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip know that every day this kind of policy continues. Sometimes it is directed towards one person, one family, one village, one neighborhood. Sometimes it's more massive, but this has not stopped. And this is why in Arabic, the Palestinians call the situation from 1948 until today al-Nakba al-Mustamirra, the ongoing Nakba, because this is an ethnic cleansing that has not stopped for a moment since 1948. Now, the main victims of this ethnic cleansing operations are people who were uprooted from their homes, their houses, their businesses. Many of them know the places well from which they were ousted or expelled. In the case of 1948, not many people are still alive from those who were expelled in 1948, but their children and their grandchildren know exactly the name of the village or the name of the city or the name of the neighborhood from which they were expelled. And even if Israel tried to cover up these operations in 1948 by building Jewish settlements over the destroyed Palestinian villages or planting forests on them, people are still know where their original village was, where their original neighborhood was, and they have not stopped dreaming and believing that one day they will be able to return to the places from which they were expelled. Now, the United Nations in 1947, 1948 proposed a solution that suggested to partition Palestine between the settler movement, Zionism, and the indigenous native people of Palestine. The Palestinian National Movement and the neighboring Arab states rejected this solution because any native people, any indigenous people would not agree to partition their homeland with a settler movement. Indonesia would have not agreed to partition Indonesia with Holland or the Netherlands or Britain or whoever as a colonial power wanted to control Indonesia. Malaysia would not have agreed to partition Malaysia between Britain or Holland on the Netherlands with the people of Malaysia. In a similar way, Palestinians were unwilling to give half of their homeland to a settler movement. But the United Nations insisted that this was the only solution, which was a terrible mistake, and therefore gave international legitimacy for the Israeli act of ethnic cleansing in 1948. I have to say that after 1948 and until today, at least the United Nations recognized the mistake it made in 47, 48, and already at the end of 1948 called for the unconditional return of all the refugees to Palestine. This is a famous United Nations resolution, Resolution 194, that calls for the unconditional return of all the refugees to their homeland, the refugees and their families and their whole the generations after that. Now, this is still the official position of the United Nations. This is still the official position of the Palestinian leadership. However, since 1967, since the United States became the dominant power that handled all the diplomatic negotiations for solving the Palestine question, since that moment, this United Nations commitment for the return of the refugees had been totally ignored by the American mediators, who only accepted the Israeli position for a solution and tended to ignore the Palestinian position. And it is very clear that from an American and a Western perspective, the conflict in Palestine for them is a conflict that began in 1967, and that the Palestinians are only the people who live in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which is 20% of historical Palestine. And they repeat the same mistake of the United Nations in 1947. The only solution they suggest now for what is called the problem of Palestine is to partition again, not the whole of Palestine, but the West Bank, which is 20% of Palestine, and the Gaza Strip, and let Israel have half of the West Bank, and the Palestinians are asked to be content with half of the West Bank, with a small enclave in the Gaza Strip. Namely, if you look at it in terms of percentage, the best the United States and the West can offer the Palestinians in 2020 is a small mini state over a little bit more than 10% of their homeland, while the no solution for the Palestinian refugee problem, the refugees today are more than 5 million, and without any recognition that the main problem in Palestine is not just territorial. It's not just a question what part of the land belongs to whom. It is a question of an historical injustice that started in 1948 or even before that and continues until today. So in many ways, if you don't deal with the refugee problems, if you don't allow the Palestinian refugees to return, if you don't put the refugee problem at the center of the efforts for reconciliation and peace and this just solution in Palestine, you are like a physician, a doctor, that deals with an illness by treating only one part of the body or one symptom of the illness and not with the problem itself. I have another 5 minutes, I think, so I would, just to summarize, I think it's very important to probably adopt what I would say are 3 A's, the letter A in English. I believe that there are 3 A's which are not the solution. I'm not a leader. I cannot offer a solution myself, but I can at least adhere to 3 principles, which for me are very important in order to explain the connection between the refugee issue and a just solution in Palestine. I call them the 3 A's. The first A is acknowledgement. It is quite incredible that since 1948 until today, despite the fact that everything is known about what happened in 1948, most of the leaders of the West, most of the diplomats and journalists which are engaged with the issue of Israel and Palestine do not acknowledge the fact that Israel committed a crime against humanity in 1948 by expelling half of Palestine's population, by destroying half of Palestine's villages and demolishing most of its towns. Not to mention that it also looted their property, their bank accounts, their fields, their businesses, and so on. This is why international law considers ethnic cleansing as a crime against humanity. So the lack of acknowledgement, even by leaders in the world which we thought in America were more understanding of the Palestine issue, such as President Jimmy Carter or President Barack Obama, they also failed to acknowledge that this is the issue, this is the heart of the matter, let alone less sympathetic leaders of the West or negotiators. So without such an acknowledgement, both by Israel and the international community, that this was a crime that not only was committed in 1948, is still being committed today, you cannot move forward to any meaningful, significant solution. The second A is the A of accountability, responsibility. It's not enough for me to say, yes, I acknowledge my state or my army expelled you, and let's move on, as if this is all I have to do. The Australians have a sorry day, a day in which Australia asks forgiveness for the Aboriginal people for the genocide Australia committed against them. But a sorry day is not enough if the Aboriginals in Australia are still living in slums and are very poor, and nobody creates an equal opportunity for them to live as normal citizens of Australia. So we know that acknowledgement is not enough. Accountability. And in the case of Palestine, accountability is very simple. It is not even the case of bringing to justice, criminals of 48, as they have done in South Africa in the Committee of Truth and Reconciliation that Bishop Desmond Tutu and Mandela have organized. It's allowing the refugees to return. This is the best way to be accountable for the crime. Implementing without hesitation the Palestinian refugee right of return is the best way to show that there's not only acknowledgement, but also accountability. And the last A, and this can only follow, is acceptance. I think if you do that, then you have to accept that there are 6 to 7 million Jews now living in what is used to be historical Palestine. It is a third generation mostly of the settlers who came in the late 19th century. They can be part of the Arab world. They can be part of its problems, but they also can be part of its solutions, and they can be integrated into the Middle East and not be a base for European or colonialism as they were in the past, or American imperialism. And I think that this is these three principles are the only ones on which you can build eventually the solution that, of course, has to consist of all kinds of arrangements about distribution of power, distribution of natural resources, reparations, compensation, and building a democratic future for everyone who lives between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, and everyone who was expelled from historical Palestine. So I think I will stop here, and thank you very much for your patience and attention. Thank you.
Okay, so much. Thank you for Professor Ilan for your enlightenment, for your sharing about the issues of the refugees. And we realized that, far before we are talking about, the Syrian refugee right now, we are much more, talking about these issues. Is something matters if we are talking about the Middle East conflict. And to be honest, I've ever visited Professor Ilan in Arish, border of Palestine near Egypt. And I met so many Palestinians over there. It means that, and they live in 1 or 2 generations. It means that the issue of, you're right, that we are not talking about refugees issues, not only talking about the current situations, but it's already started from 1948, but even much more before, It means, as far as I know, there was Aliyah, if I'm not mistaken, Aliyah, the wave of the Israel movement, the Zionist movement, from around the world to come to Palestinian land. So it means that it's very critical situations, and Professor Ilan also remind us with 3 A's regarding to the issues of the refugees and the Palestinians. The first one, acknowledgement, and then accountability, and the third one about the acceptance. Okay. Thank you again, Professor Ilan, and we will next to another speakers. Mbak Andini, Miss Wafa, I saw that she is already come.
Yes, I think he's ready now.
Miss Wafa. Okay, this. Someone raise hand now. Miss Wafa, in the participants, can we make him as the panelist? He's already come. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, Ms. Wafa. Can you hear my voice? Sabahul khair. Oh. Yeah. Okay, welcome. Assalamualaikum, Ms. Wafa.
Walaikum salam. Walaikum salam. How are you?
I'm fine. How about you?
Yeah, I am good, alhamdulillah. Thank you. Sorry for being late for this webinar. And I hope that my voice is clear.
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you for your time. For joining us. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the second speaker. She is Ms. Wafa Al-Udaini, and she is the Palestinian journalist. And right now, she's also the correspondent of Palestine Chronicles. And she is also the activist in International Solidarity Movement and contributor of BCFM Radio in UK. And she is also the manager of the 16 October group. And she will be delivering the topic about the right of return for Palestinians. I think this is something that Professor Ilan also mentioned many times in his presentation, right of returns as a Palestinian. Please, Ms. Wafa, you have 30 minutes. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me in this webinar. And really, it's a great thing to focus on such topic, which is so important, because you know that these days, this issue, so many countries, I mean, regarding Israel and US and their allies, they are trying to eliminate this issue. I mean, the Palestinian refugee issue. Okay, so regarding me first, I have to introduce myself first. I am Wafa Al-Udaini. I'm a journalist based in the Gaza Strip. As you told the participants that I work for different publications. Regarding actually, I covered the Israeli aggressions on the Gaza Strip since nearly 2012. And recently I covered the Great Return March, which is massive, and popular demonstrations. The people of Gaza, decided to launch this Great Return March because, that Israel imposed a siege, land and the ground and sea siege on the Gaza Strip. So, so the people of Gaza, this thing affects them so bad, and that several aggressions occurred in the Gaza Strip, and over than 2,000 Palestinians got murdered by Israeli fire. And so many got murdered in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. So the people of Gaza, I mean, this thing is it came from the people themselves because they believe that they have to act and they have to end this blockade that is imposed in Gaza since long time, and that affect every single thing in Gaza regarding the health situation, which is on the brink of collapse, and in any moment it's gonna be collapsed, and this will be another Nakba for Palestinians. So they started the Great Return March, which is massive and popular demonstrations where the people of Gaza were geared into the fence between Israel and Gaza. So you can find like tens of thousands of Palestinians, elderly, women, children, and everybody is participating in these demonstrations. because they call it is a peaceful demonstration. So they called to end this siege on Gaza, and they called to return to their homeland because they believe that recently so many trials are trying to eliminate eliminate the right of return. For maybe for the people who are listening right now, they don't know about the Palestinian refugees and the whole issue. I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about this thing. I myself am a Palestinian refugee. My parents were forced to eject from their land in 1948, and my parents and my grandparents. Actually, my parents and the grandparents told me so horror stories when they forced to leave their towns and their cities in 1948. So they just so many got massacred. So many towns, you know, got wiped out of the map. Many bad things actually happened, and the people just went out or left their cities and countries, cities and towns barefooted, you know, without anything in their hands. And some women, you know, just you know, left their sons and their you know, their babies behind them. And so many, there is like a story by Ghassan Karafani when a woman left her son in the house, and then she couldn't come back again to her home. And then this little kid, the Israeli, the Zionist gangs at that moment, they just occupy her house and took her child and raised him to be in the Israeli soldier. So actually, so many things. This thing happened actually in 1948, and so many Palestinians, some of them went to the Gaza Strip, including my family and other families, and other Palestinians to the West Bank, and the rest of those refugees actually outside of Palestine, some in the Arab countries and some other in the European countries. So you can find like 2 million Palestinians here in Gaza, and in West Bank 3 million, and outside I think more than 5 million Palestinian refugees. So this thing actually we have here UNRWA that take care of the Palestinian refugees. But this thing actually, the people felt the threat here, and felt that this thing, the right of return, is gonna be eliminated by the, you know, the power of, I mean, regarding U.S. and Israel. So they decided to launch this Great Return March in order to save the in return, and in order to end the blockade that is imposed in Gaza, and because they believe that before when they were in their towns and countries, they were so happy, they have many things, there wasn't like a siege or any aggressions or stuff. So they believe that if we are in our homes, the things will not be like it is right now. Every day there is aggressions. Every day there is a brutality by the occupation and the stuff. So as you see here, the Great Return March, and here are the people that are, you know, participating in this massive marches. And unfortunately, despite, you know, that it is peaceful and it is popular demonstrations, but in fact, the Israeli occupation forces, they just used the lethal force against the Palestinians, and over than 260 Palestinians got murdered, including journalists, including paramedics, including women, and over than 35 children got murdered in this massive demonstrations, and over than 2,000 got wounded. And regarding actually this huge number of injuries, you know, the Israeli occupation actually forces, they mean, you know, they sniped actually the people, and they know where their bullet is going. So so many young men, they lost their legs, and so many lost their arms, and we believe that this thing, we believe that they mean to kill the spirit of those youth, because actually they prove you know, bravery and courageous. They were so courageous, you know, to face the well-armed Israeli forces, and they were so peaceful, and they were just standing and protesting against them. So this act is so actually so courageous from the Palestinians. So the Israeli occupation forces, they mean, you know, to kill their spirit, and they mean to let them, you know, to let them, you know, go down and stop their fighting, and then surrender to the status quo. And as you see here in these pictures, here are elderlies and the children got injured. And for your information, maybe some of you will ask what the people are doing there when they are protesting near the fence with Israel. Actually, what they are doing, they are just doing like tradition activities. They are you know, some children dance dabka because it's kind of our tradition, and some women, you know, bake like bread, and you know, cook like traditional Palestinian food, because they believe that they don't want the occupation to they don't want the occupation to let them forget about their traditions, about their old ages, about their old countries. And here actually, because I covered this Great Return March, so I interviewed several people, and really so many stories inspired me so much. And actually, for the first time, and to be honest to you, I felt afraid, you know, of going there, because you are just unarmed. Just hold on, please. So you know, it's we are a human being, and of course we will feel afraid, because you are unarmed and you face well-armed or armed to teeth Israeli soldiers. So when I went there to these demonstrations, and I looked to the children, women, and elderly, and men, you know, they are so courageous, and they inspired me to go on and to cover their suffering, because they fear nothing, because they said that Israel took everything, so we have to defend ourselves. We have to get back our own lands, our occupied lands. So, for example, one of the stories that I covered, it is Majd al-Madhoun. Majd al-Madhoun is a Palestinian child. His age was nearly 12 years old. And he used to participate in the Great Return March. He is, you know, he draws, as you see, these are his drawings. And he is so talented, mashallah. And he, you know, participated in every week in these demonstrations. And as you see, just like we can say artist and participate, and he's a small kid. And the Israeli occupation forces, actually, they sniped him. And as you see in the second picture, he got injured, and not one time, actually, more than one time. because the first injury for him, it was a little bit lightly injured. So he came back again and participate again in this march. He came in the second demonstration, and then they got shot him again. And you can imagine this thing, so bad, because he did nothing. He just was drawings and doing drawings and paintings, and just want to raise the awareness of his people from this occupation by his drawings, but they shot him. Another story actually is a story of a woman. Maybe if you go for another picture here. This woman, this man, for example, you know that so many thousands of Palestinian demonstrators were injured. And you know the thing that is actually so shocking or so inspiring, those men or those people, when they got injured, they didn't surrender, or they didn't just stuck in their homes and they said that we regret going there and stuff. They never said that we are regretting this act. Actually, more than one times, whenever I go there and I just see so many Palestinians injured. They are just lost their legs and lost their hands, but you go again and participate in these demonstrations. And so many actually injured people, they got injured more than one time. For example, there is the icon. There is a guy. His name is Aed. First time he got shot in his right leg, and then when he came back again, when he recovered, and then when he came back again, they shot the other leg. And you can imagine, he will be surrendered, and then he will not come back again. But he came back again, and he participated in these demonstrations. And then the third time, they actually fired tear gas against him. So, and you can find so many of this, not only one case, so many cases, thousands of cases, such like this. And the other story actually is the story of the woman, this young woman. She is only 19 years old. She told me that from day one she used to participate in this demonstration because she believed in her right to return to their homeland, and because she wants to do something for her people who are suffering daily from the occupation. So she was safely protesting, and she many times rescue injured women, and unfortunately they shot her, or they sniped her in the eye. She lost her eye indeed, and this is so sad because she is so young, and then she got lost her own eye. And this thing, when I went to interview her, I thought that maybe I will find a devastating woman, like I regret going there or stuff. But on the opposite, when I went to interview her, she is not devastating at all. She told me that when I recover again, inshallah, I will be back to this demonstration, and I will participate again and again until we get our freedom. So also there is another story for an old woman, who is using her cart, donkey cart, and for holding these tires or these car wheels. You know, maybe some of you think why she are holding such things. This thing actually she just took or searched for these tires and bring them. There is a long distance actually separation fence, but she used to take her cart and hold these tires on her cart, and then distribute it to the to the youth there, the demonstrations, the demonstrate, huge smoke, because they believe that when there is a smoke, the occupation forces cannot snipe them. But kind of this thing, actually this method kind of worked, and the Israeli couldn't snipe them easily. But after this act, the Israeli authorities actually banned these tires from entering into the Gaza Strip. So there was like a lack of these tires. Then they stopped using these tires. But such a woman and her name over than 50 years old and using this thing, maybe we will think that what makes this woman, make this thing, or what encourages her to help the people and go there. She is an elderly woman and she have to take care of her home and to stay safe in her home. But she decided to go and participate because she believed that she is living under, under suffocating siege, under the brutality of occupation. So she participated because she wanted to get rid of this occupation and because she believed in her right of return. I'm not sure if there are more than these stories. The link for this young child, if you can just click on it, please. And actually, this child, the link for the video, please. So actually, this young child is so courageous. And he is so brave. He got awarded from many of the Palestinian officials and organizers of the return march. He rescued a man, and maybe you can show them the video, please. He rescued a man, an injured man, and actually nobody else can rescue this man. So this brave kid, and you can see right now in this video how he ran away for this injured man and take off his shirt and then stop the bleeding of the injured man. And it's so a courageous thing, and you can find so many of such child. Are you gonna open it again, the video, or? Yeah. So just to let you see how the Palestinian children are acting, they fear nobody, and they just act in a brave way against the occupation. Yeah. So. And actually, this is not the only case. So many children indeed did like a courageous thing, and you can find them participate in like they recite poems, they do so many stuff in these the demonstrations and stuff. these are just very, very few examples of the the people who participate in these massive rallies. So yeah, here is the kid. He is only 12 years old and he's from Rafah. And in this video, he is trying to rescue an injured man. And as you see here, he's taking off his shirt and you know, helping the injured person. And if you see the sandy hill, the sandy hills there, it is for the Israeli snipers. They just hide behind this sandy hill and just to snipe and shoot the Palestinians. And indeed, they are so coward because when the people came to rescue this injured man, they just shot at them. But finally, they as you see here, they you know, managed to take or to help this injured man, and he survived as I know. Yeah, so actually, if we can spend like not only one day, more than one day, more than one day. Actually, so many stories to be told, and in the mainstream media, you never heard about it. And unfortunately, they only covered that you know, there are so many demonstrations and Israel killed the blah blah blah, and that's it. But they never told the people that there are so many stories behind these numbers. There are so many human interest stories that the world need to hear, unfortunately. So actually, so many stories to be told indeed, and I hope that the world one day believe or act or stop from aiding the Israeli occupation and this you know, injustice in this oppression against the people of Palestine in general. You know, right now about the Great Return March, and as you see, it is stopped, but it is not a stop. Actually, since last year, the occupation, I mean, the organizers of the Great Return March, they believe that they have to follow another policy, another things, you know, in order to stop, you know, to the Israeli from killing more people, from injuring more people. So they just said that we are not gonna make it weekly protest. We are just gonna make it like occasionally, like when there is a national day for Palestinians. So we will hold these demonstrations. And last year, in every national occasion, they just the separation fence and you know, call for their rights. And this thing actually in this year things a little bit different. Actually, after the 13th, the March, this year March, because we have COVID-19 here in Gaza, and things are so much, you know, difficult, because you know that Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world. So so many refugee camps here in Gaza, so many crowded things, areas. So indeed, the things will be difficult if COVID is spread here in Gaza, and actually they fear of such things, and then they stopped or they suspended these demonstrations until, inshallah, you know, came to an end with this COVID-19 or this pandemic, and then they will come back again. But we hope that this siege will be end, and we will not be having, we will not be we will not have to, hold such demonstrations and the stuff. Actually, the things right now is so bad in Gaza regarding COVID-19, because many times since the beginning of this year, we just sent so many messages to the whole world that if this pandemic came to Gaza, it will be another disaster. And right now, actually, we are facing, we are witnessing the things are so dangerous, so serious. We have so many cases every day, and you know that the health sector here in Gaza is in the brink of collapse. We don't have enough hospitals because of the siege. We don't have, medicines, all kinds of medicine, and we just, with the AIDS and with the aids from outside, and this thing actually put pressure on the Palestinians here in Gaza, and we fear that in any moment maybe the health sector will be collapsed because we cannot deal with these huge number of cases. Yeah, but we hope, inshallah, we pray that nothing bad will happen. And this is actually all for the Great Return March, and I hope that I answer all of your questions or the questions that in your mind. And this is all for my presentation. So if you have any questions, maybe I forgot to tell you about or stuff, I'm ready also to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wafa, for your presentation. I think, yes, Ms. Wafa already tell us this afternoon in Indonesia about the many stories about the Palestine, especially about the right, the Great March of Return, yeah, that what happened in March, if I'm mistaken. And this is very interesting story for me. And there's so many accidents, but we are still having so many insightful and inspiring story from the Palestinian. And it reminds me one of the Palestinian artists, Rafif Ziadah, and in her poem, We Teach Life, Sir, she put a very interesting statement at the end of her poem. She said that Palestinians wake up every morning to teach the rest of the world life, sir. She said like that. I think one of so many stories that Ms. Wafa told us this afternoon, told those things for us. Okay, thank you again, Ms. Wafa, for your presentations. And I think now is the time for the floors to give for the session of question and answer. But so far in the chat box, we don't have any questions so far. But from our friends, Andini mentioned me that she has a question for Professor Ilan and Ms. Wafa, the same question. She asked, what do you think about the two-state solution? Yeah, two-state solution for Professor Ilan and Ms. Wafa. I think, yeah.
Yeah, this is it.
Okay, and then I also have
for me.
Okay, for Ms. Wafa and Prof. Ilan, please. For the first, I think I can give Prof. Ilan for answering these questions. What do you think about the two-state solution, Prof. Ilan? Please.
Thank you for the question. I don't believe that the two-state solution is a viable solution. I think that for more than 50 years, this was the main solution on the table, and it had a powerful coalition that wanted to push it forward from the United States through Europe, Russia, and so on. Some Arab regimes have supported this idea in the Saudi Peace Initiative or the Arab League Peace Initiative. I think it's time to admit, for those who need it, that this solution is dead. And it is dead for two reasons. One is, as I mentioned in my talk, the whole idea of partition does not deal with the real issues in Palestine. Partition means that you neglect 80% of historical Palestine. It means that you ignore the refugee issue, which is the main focus of our webinar this afternoon in Indonesia, and therefore it's a colonialist solution for a problem that needs to be decolonized. So that's one reason. The second reason that the two-state solution is not going to work are the facts on the ground. In the last 50 years and so, Israel established settlements in the West Bank, all over the West Bank. It built proper cities in the West Bank, and therefore there is no way that the two-state solution that some Palestinians believe in, namely a proper sovereign independent state that would consist of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, is not a possibility anymore. So the best two-state solution one can offer today is what we call the Bantustans, some small enclaves in the West Bank, a small enclave in the Gaza Strip. This is not a solution. This is redeploying the occupation, or its occupation by other means. So I think it's time for the international community to recognize that this solution has failed. I think it's time for the Palestinians, of course, to offer us an alternative vision for the future. They have to lead the way in telling us what is the substitute, the best substitute for the two-state solution. But I think politically, historically, and practically, this solution is dead. It's totally dead, and is impossible to implement. And as I pointed out, is also not a just solution for the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ilan. And then Ms. Wafa, please.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, Mr. Ilan, Professor Ilan. It's so pleasure to be with you in this webinar. Okay, so I totally agree with Professor Ilan so much, and for myself and for most of Palestinians here in Palestine, they don't believe in the two-state solutions because we believe that this thing means the end of the right of return, and this means that so many Palestinians outside and refugees will never return to Palestine. So and here, if you are talking about the two-state solution, actually it is unfortunately it is not a solution, because it is not because, as you know, that U.S. and Israel right now and the Gulf countries right now, they are just normalizing Israel and cut so many ties with the Palestinians. So and with the deal of the century, indeed, that Trump are working on, and his allies. Actually, they kill the peace process, and they end the thing that by this deal, I mean, they end the right of return. So there is no such this thing. Actually, they use this thing just in the media and in their speeches. We are just seeking for two-state solution, for peace and for stuff, but all of these things are just lies, because there is nothing can be implemented on the ground. And
Ms. Wafa?
There are quite often electricity issues in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
You have to take this into account. This could happen. It's part of the reality there. You know,
yeah,
they have
something.
quota of electricity by Israel, and
Yes, that's right, Professor.
Let's hope that the connection would be re-established. It would be a pity to lose Wafa.
Okay, maybe, Professor, maybe we can move to the other question, yeah?
Yeah.
The other participants today. And we have another two questions from, yeah, he doesn't mention the name, but he asked in Q&A box. He asked, good afternoon. Thanks for all the amazing speakers today. I have a big curiosity about this one. Is there any Palestinian refugees or any Palestinian who now lives in West countries with freedom, who lose their sense of belonging of their homeland? And is there any of them who's being ignorant of what happened to their land now because now they are living in life without any settlers? Thank you in advance.
Yes, thank you. I read I had read the question myself.
Yeah.
So, but it's good for you to repeat it.
Okay.
I think it's a fair question. There are quite a few NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and international organizations that carry every now and then surveys among young Palestinians, refugees, wherever they are, in South America, Southeast Asia, Europe, and in the West. And they all come back with the same results. A vast majority, I cannot vouch for everyone, but I think a vast majority, even of the youngest Palestinians, are fully aware of the right of return, are fully aware of their personal and collective history. And this is very interesting, that despite everything that happened, there is still this sense of belonging and commitment. You know, one of the Israeli leaders in 1948 said, when he was asked, immediately after the Nakba, he was asked, what do you think would happen with the Palestinian refugees? And he said, well, I think half of them will die and half of them will forget. Well, they have not forgotten. And I think that very, very few of them have lost the kind of identity or desire or believe in the right of return. So I think this is still a very important part of the identity of Palestinians, whether they are in refugee camps in the Arab world, whether they live in relative good conditions in the West. And I'm sure you can meet some Palestinian refugees in Indonesia as well. I know that I met a large group in Malaysia. So wherever they are, this is still something that defines their identity and their sense of justice.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And about the first question that mentioned by Muhammad Sirajuddin. Actually, he was joined us also as a speaker in the last seminar last month. Yeah, Mr. Sirajuddin is one of the lecturer in Netherlands, and he's now living in India. And he asked you about the compensation. Is it possible, and who will pay, or who is the donor? It's about the compensation for the Palestinian refugees who's now living displaced in the Palestinians. Please, Professor.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think compensation. Let me remind all of us that Resolution 194 of the United Nations says that Palestinian refugees have the right to return or be compensated. So it's not one or the other. You can ask for both. I think that so much money has been poured into Israel from the West, especially from the United States. I don't think there is a problem of finance or funding. And I think accountability, as I understand it, is the compensation paid by the people or the state that committed the crime itself. And therefore, I think the compensation would be first coming from Israel, and secondly, from other sources who are also partially responsible for what happened, like Britain, the United States. I don't think it would be a big issue to find the money. You know, in 1952, Germany started paying billions of dollars to Israel as a compensation for the Holocaust, for the genocide of the Jews in the Second World War. There were a few honest Jewish philosophers who said some of that money should go to the Palestinian refugees who are the victims of the victims. So I don't think it's a big issue. I don't think you have to invent the wheel. I think there are very proper international procedures for how to pay compensation and who should pay compensation. But basically, I think, yes, the state that committed the crime is the one that has to compensate. But I think for most Palestinian refugees, the return, first and foremost, is much more important than the compensation. But of course, compensation is part of the deal.
Okay.
I think we have Wafa back, so.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Prof. Ilan. Okay,
yeah.
Wafa, Ms. Wafa, can you continue your explanation before?
Yeah, sorry for this cut. It's out of, you know, yeah. Do you want me to continue my answer, or?
Yes, continue your answer, please. If you have any opinion about this last question that we gave to you.
About the two-state solution? Yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, that such a solution is not a solution. It's just a propaganda that the Israelis and the Americans use to tell or to convince the people that they are seeking for peace between Israel and Palestine. But indeed, this thing, the Palestinians do not believe in such things, and they believe in returning to their homeland is the only solution. And the thing is, you know, they believe that we can live with Jews, Christians, Muslims, all of the religions are together, because, you know, before the occupation, these the three religions were lived together and in peace. But after the occupation, actually, this thing, you know, is, you know, affect the cause and affect everything. And indeed, the Palestinians here believe that they can live with everyone in peace without occupation. And they are, all of the religions are welcome, but there shouldn't be oppression or occupation by anyone. So we do believe in the one-state solution, and we don't believe in two-state solution at all, because this means that the eliminating of the right of return and banning so many Palestinians from returning to Palestine. And this means also many things, many horrible things will happen. And indeed, so many Jews outside Palestine, and they are so friendly with Palestinians, and there are so many relations between Muslims and Jews, and they oppose Israel, and they oppose the Israeli policy against Palestinians, and they believe that this occupation has to come to an end, and Israel do not have to occupy Palestine for you know, this long time. So the only solution is to end the occupation. Nothing. It's not about the two-state solution. We don't have this option. Yeah.
Thank you, Wafa. And also, we have two or more questions, and my friends chat to me that the question that they asked about regarding if the issue of the return of the refugees to Palestine. As we know that the Palestinian territory is very small and dense. Yeah. If the regarding to the issue of the return of the refugees to Palestine, do you think where should they live? Yeah, regarding to the issue of Palestine now is really the territory is really small and dense. Where should they live? Wafa.
Yeah, and you know, for your information, there are so many places and areas in Israel right now. Nobody lives in it, and there's so many Palestinian towns just you know got destroyed, and nobody live in it right now. So before the occupation, there are so many wide areas, and Palestinians were there and the Jews were there. But those immigrants who came from outside Palestine and when they came here and you know commit so many massacres against Palestinians, those I think have to go to their homeland because you know this land is for the indigenous people the indigenous people. So and if you go to Israel right now, you can find so many long distance, so many wide areas, and in these areas nobody live in it, and nobody you know use that. For example, I heard so many stories from the people who has this chance to go to these lands just to look at it and then come back. For example, just you know months ago, a friend told me that her friend go to Israel because she is from American. She has American passport, not Palestinian. So she went there and she saw the house of her grandparents there. Nobody, you know, live in it. But for other houses, you know, the Israelis just got occupied and take it as it is. You know, they changed nothing in it and they just steal it with everything in it and live in it. But her for her luck, you know, her parents' house, her grandparents' house, nobody live in it, and it was like a ghost house or stuff. So, and then all the area as it, as this house. So, I totally believe that you know, I totally believe that if all of you know all of us live together in peace, without occupation, without oppression, of course we will. It will be good thing. We should respect each one, and you know this land you know can be for everyone, for anyone who believe in peace, not on occupation.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Okay, please.
Yeah, I fully agree with Wafa, and I think that's why Wafa also mentioned that in a two-state solution, it's very difficult to implement the right of return. That's why one-state solution is much more reasonable if we agree that the right of return is the most important aspect of a solution. And secondly, there is a very interesting research by someone called Salman Abu Sitta. And Salman Abu Sitta, who has a very interesting website, has looked at this question in a very professional way. And he found out that there are many areas from which the Palestinians originally came that are not inhabited, and that there's enough space and enough room for the refugees to settle, almost in many cases, very near the places from which they were expelled. So I think there is enough space, there is enough capacity. It's a question of the will, not means. The means are there, the procedures are there. It's just an ideological question, and a moral question, which I think is important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Ilan. And can we add some questions? Yeah, I think we still have time. Some of the participants also asked about regarding to the issue of the normalizations between Israel and the Arab states, yeah, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and maybe some of the Arabic countries will do the same policy. Does this policy what's the impact of this policy to the issue of the Israel-Palestinian issue, and is it fostering the peace between this issue or not, Professor?
Yes. First of all, I think that the normalization is an attempt by the United States and Israel to depoliticize the Palestine question, to remove the Palestine question from the regional and international agenda. This is the main motive. It's not a motive about peace and living together. It's an attempt by Israel to convince the world that there is no problem in Palestine anymore, and that they can continue with the colonization, the dispossession, and the occupation. So unfortunately, I think these Arab regimes are helping Israel and providing Israel with international immunity for its policies on the ground. That's number one. So definitely it's not contributing to peace and reconciliation. In fact, it distances us from peace and reconciliation. The second point I want to say, and this is particularly true about Bahrain, and you can mention Sudan is another country that has the rulers there said that they are thinking seriously of normalizing a relationship with Israel. I think for countries like Bahrain and Sudan, it's important to remember that this is not what the people of Bahrain and Sudan want. There is a long history of commitment to the Palestine question, solidarity with the Palestine question. So I think the societies there are still committed to the Palestine question, but the rulers are not. And therefore, I don't think this will hold. I don't think it will last. And I don't think that in our history books, we will write about it, in 50 years from now, that this was a historical moment when Israel made peace with the Arab world. I don't think so. I think this is a normalization that is connected much more to the Trump administration than anything else. And I don't predict that it will. And I don't think it changes anything, as I said, in the commitment of the people of these countries to the Palestine question.
Ms. Wafa, do you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, I just want to add that just this week there is Yussi Gan. He is an Israeli. He is the head of Israeli settlement in the West Bank, and he went to Emirates, United Arab Emirates, and they just discussed more project in order to strengthen the Israeli settlement economy. Because you know that these Israeli settlements are illegal according to the international law, and the EU court just issued a decision that any products that came from the Israeli settlements in the West Bank should be written as Israeli settlement, not in Israel, because they believe they know that these settlements, illegal settlements, are are illegal, and nobody should, deal with it. But unfortunately, the United Arab Emirates, when they, contact this person and discuss economic relations, this means that they are gonna strengthen their economy, and they are gonna cover the Emirati market with the Israeli settlements products, and this is a very shameful thing. And indeed, these normalizations, indeed, they meant to strengthen Israel and, and make Israel commit more crimes every single day for Palestinians, and make Israel act as it is above the law, and nobody can stop it. Every day they will steal more Palestinian lands, and every day they will kill and murder and occupy and arrest more Palestinians. So normalization, it's a betrayal for Palestinians and for the justice cause indeed. We hope that no other countries will follow these Gulf countries.
Thank you, Wafa. And I have one more question from my friends that he asked, what is the most effective step in empowering the Palestinian refugees? Wafa?
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, what is the most effective step in empowering? Yeah, because there's a lot of Palestinian refugees in many countries. Do you think?
Yeah.
What is the most effective step in empowering them? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I do believe that there should be a pressure from the governments, from the governments around the world, to put a pressure on Israel or on the world in order to stop the occupation and make a solution for these refugees. And actually, this pressure came from the people themselves. The people of these countries, they should act, protest, and talk to their governments in this issue, because the issue of refugees outside, it's so Palestinian outside do not feel that safe because they are not in their country indeed. So the thing that is needed from these from the people of the countries around the world is to act, to protest, in order to put pressure on these on their governments to so their governments can talk to can put pressure on Israel and on the power in this world in order to stop Israel from their occupation, and in order to keep the right to return for Palestinians.
Prof. Ilan, do you want to add something?
Yes, I think that there are many ways in which the international community, I'm talking mainly about the civil society, that's about the governments, that have shown solidarity over the years with the Palestinian refugees and fully support the right of return. As you probably know, in Indonesia, the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanction campaign, includes the right of return as one of the rights for which it operates this campaign of boycott and sanctions and divestment in support of the Palestinians. So I think this should be extended and enhanced. And I agree with Wafa. I think it's this is the main thing that succeeded in South Africa. When you move from boycott, which is an action of the civil society, to sanction, which is a movement or a policy from above by the governments, we should continue our effort to convince the governments to show responsibility and understand that this is the only way forward. And this is an historical injustice that has been going on for too long and has to be rectified and corrected. So I think that there's a lot of things people in Indonesia and elsewhere can do. I think the Indonesian government basically is far more supportive of the Palestine question than many other governments, but I still think that the Muslim countries in Southeast Asia can do much more to play a much more principal role or a more important role and push forward for a different agenda, and in many ways replace the mediation that we have now that comes from Washington and Europe and is not honest, brokery, does not help anyone, and perpetuates the conflict rather than solving it.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Ilan and Wafa, for your very inspiring insight for this seminar. I think we are in this room meeting get many things that we learn. The problem of refugee of Palestinian is not simple. This is something complex. And then this is very long history. That it's right that what Professor Ilan said, that regarding to this issue, we cannot we cannot leave this refugee problem only on the corner. Yeah, we have to make it at the center of reconciliation. Yeah, because this is something matters. When we're talking about refugee, we are talking also about the right to live without fear. Yeah, it is the basic rights of every peoples, not only in Palestine but also in many worlds. Yeah, live without fear. Yeah, and also something that I can learn today. Also, something matters regarding to this issue is something that what Professor Ilan also said with 3 A's. Yeah, the first one, acknowledgement. This is something also something matters. Yeah. In other words, we can say that literacy is something matters. Yeah, learn about history is something matters. We are not talking about the Palestinian issue only regarding to the issue of normalization between Arab countries and Israel, but it's a very long history. And then this is something that we have to learn, and maybe if the participant have time and also use your time to read the many articles that written by Professor Ilan and also Wafa. As far as I know, you also write books, yeah, produce many books, and I think this is something productive and important for us for open our mind and know the real what is happened in the Palestine issue. I'm really on behalf of Nusantara Palestina Center and CDCL Sharq. I'm really very thankful for Professor Ilan for your time and also Wafa for your time. Thank you for all of your insight for us. I think this is very constructive and important for us. Thank you once again. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
you.
Okay. And then for all the participants, ya terima kasih semuanya sudah hadir dalam kesempatan kali ini pada seluruh peserta. Dan ini bukan pertemuan yang terakhir. Kita insya Allah masih akan bertemu dalam sesi seminar kembali, webinar yang akan diadakan nanti di bulan Desember yang lebih khusus membahas tentang isu-isu khusus tentang khusus tentang Palestina, khususnya tentang anak-anak, wanita dan anak-anak dan wanita dan kaum disabilitas di Palestina. Oke, sampai jumpa bulan depan di webinar kolaborasi antara Nusantara Palestina Center dengan CDCL Sharq. Terima kasih, saya atas nama NPC dan CDC mengucapkan ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Ilan and Wafa, for your time. Okay. Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay.